Go ahead and call the meeting in order. Start with the pledge.
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Lord, as we begin this meeting, we ask that you guide our thoughts and actions so that we may have a successful meeting today. Help us to accomplish our goals while displaying your character. May we be filled with the fullness of God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Call the meeting to workshop.
Chairman, our consultant, HDR engineer, is running a couple of minutes late. He's on his way here. He should be coming to the building, but if you'd like to skip down to the reports and then we'll come back to the workshop.
Let's go on the reports.
Okay. First item on the agenda is a report on program manager activities for the 365 Toei project and the Ibtc environmental clearance document. Eric Davila will give you a report.
Good evening. We should be switching presentations here shortly. There we go. Okay. So fast forwarding here to the 365 Toei. Our latest status was that we are in the process of working out the project development agreement for the gap funding on the construction funding needed for the 365 Toei. That's going to include essentially an engineering level type approval, not administrative level, but the head engineer of TxDOT has to essentially approve the project as ready to proceed for commission consideration. So we do still anticipate, and the schedule shows that June, July would be when the commission would consider the financial assistance agreement. In other words, would allow the staff to engage the RMA to discuss terms of the financial assistance agreement, which are largely the grant funding that needs to get programmed to the project. And so we anticipate that to move forward here pretty shortly. Any questions on 365 Toei? That's essentially the latest status.
August? I mean for June?
For June, yes, Chairman. We received word that we'll be on the agenda for June for the financial assistance agreement, the FAA. And then I had a discussion with Norma Garza last week, and we were over the phone. We were going over the project development agreement for the project. So project development agreement is the roles and responsibilities, and the financial assistance agreement is the money, basically. So we were updating the PDA last week, and we should be getting a draft this week for our legal counsel to review.
Good.
On the Ibtc project, we've been working toward a summer, at this point, probably a late summer environmental assessment on the environmental document. What we are pushing for now, and you have a copy of a letter, is to essentially sit and go through some of the last technical comments that we have from TxDOT on some recent guidance that was published by TxDOT that is being placed, I guess, as part of the final comments that we have on the environmental document. We do see a path forward on being able to accommodate the guidance, but also try to maintain our schedule without this becoming a prolonged process. And so the request here before TxDOT is to sit and basically commit to a schedule that still has us getting a schematic approval prior to November 1st of this year, so that this guidance doesn't trigger certain provisions that may prolong the environmental process. So the long and short of it is that we're working toward that. We think there's technical solutions for all this. And so we hope to report a schedule on when we might have a public hearing by the next meeting. Any other questions on Ibtc at this time that I can entertain? No, hearing none, those are the highlights. Thank you.
Get Colby out of the way. Chairman, the next item on the agenda is 1B, is a report on 365 Toei project financing activities. We have Colby Eccles with Hilltop Securities here to give you a report. Richard Ramirez is tied up with an issuance right now for the Central Texas RMA, I believe. And so Colby will give you a report on our activities.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, directors. Thank you all for having me. Sorry Richard couldn't make it. He sends his regrets, but he was tied up with an NTTA closing. They sold bonds earlier this year and they're finally done with it. So I'm sure he's happy to be done with that. Eric touched on it a minute ago. There's no action from TxDOT this month. What Richard informed me was that tolls are still a hot button issue with the legislature. So they don't want anything going before TxDOT for the commission while legislature's in session. So once signing die hits next month, it should be going, hopefully, fingers crossed. And I guess Pilar mentioned that it will be. Last month, I'm not sure if Richard informed you guys, but we were working with TxDOT. They came back with some additional questions on capacity analysis for this project. We got back to them. Everything appears to be good. They didn't come back with any additional questions. We answered their question. We ran it. And there appears to be plenty of capacity, about 47 million based on current rates plus 50 basis points. So we think that this project is still very much viable at this point, and hopefully in the future, whenever we get to the point where we can finance this. Wanted to touch on the market a little bit. The economy, of course, is expanding. Jobless claims are high, but that more than likely has to do with some of the stimulus. People are encouraged to stay home. They can make more at home than they can going out and getting jobs. But I talked with our, talked with our desk, asked them about where they see the market in 6 months. They're thinking probably 25 to 50 basis points higher as a result of just an improving economy. At some point, the jobless claims are going to decrease. People are going to be encouraged to go back to work, and the economy is going to start booming even more so than it is. And hopefully inflation will be transitory and it will go down a little bit, and we won't have a spike in rates. But even at 25 to 50 basis points, we feel like this project is very much doable. That's what we've been running for TxDOT, and the coverages are well within the range that we feel that they should be. So with that, I'll entertain any questions you might have.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Chairman and directors, our consultant has arrived. So if we can go back to the workshop, to the presentation by the general engineering consultant, HDR Engineering, on the 365 toll plan, quantity audit and opinion of probable cause. If you recall, about the beginning of the year, the board authorized HDR to look at two things. One, to see if the quantities for the plans reconciled so that we didn't have any busts in those quantities. And two, to look at the unit prices of all those quantities so that we could get a third-party review to see if our quantities were in line and to see if our estimate was in line. So Sam Saldivar with HDR Engineering is here to give you a presentation on that.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Directors. My name is Sam Saldivar. I'm here representing HDR, and I'm going to take you through a brief presentation on the work that we've done for the 365 toll in partnership with Pilar and Eric and Ramon. So again, to reiterate, we were looking at reviewing the quantities and also going through an exercise for looking at what the market was doing, at least between February and April, for the unit costs that may come in for the project itself. What we did was we sat down with Hidalgo County RMA and we said, hey, look, there's a certain amount of items that can be identified that represents 80% of the project cost. And so we went through that and we identified 29 of those items that would be targeted for the OPCC review process. And we also did the same thing, you'll see here in a little while, that those items also aligned with the items we're gonna look at as far as quantities. So it came out to 29 items that we looked at that fell within that 80% threshold, and we ended up doing a ground up effort of contacting material suppliers and potential subcontractors and talking to them about what the current conditions are at the time. And we ended up looking at concluding we were bringing in and noticing that what they were saying is since last time labor rates had increased from 18 to 25%. Materials like rebar and steel has increased since the last time this project went to letting. Trucking prices have actually remained somewhat level, and then of course the precast materials, it has the same materials that went up as far as concrete and steel. The results are that, you know, looking back at the bid that came in 2017 versus what unit costs that we were seeing coming in for these items, we looked at a range where it can come in anywhere from 258 million up into 269 million on the high side. Now, during this process, we were also parallel looking at the quantities and going through the plan set, digging into them and finding out where those items were. And we did a takeoff like we were a contractor. And what we found when we went through that is, for the most part, a lot of them fell within an acceptable tolerance when you're doing takeoff quantities, because you're not the engineer getting into the plan set. You're looking at it from a contractor's point of view. You know, what am I going to find? Does it match what the client has in their bid tabs? And that'll affect the risk that they price in there. So there were 5 items that were beyond 6%, which were the concrete for the vents, some of the riprap, most strips, and then the wick drains. Despite there being that amount of difference as far as percentage-wise, in the grand scheme of thing, it really wasn't a large dollar amount that would swing the prices one way or another, but we made note of it, and we discussed that with the RMA staff. While we were in there doing those takeoffs, we did notice some things with the plans that we felt could make the plans clearer for the contractors that are going to be doing the same thing as far as those takeoffs and analysis on the plan sheets. So we went ahead and identified some of those, and we show an example here on the screen where as far as, for example, the ramps, how they interface with the main lanes, there wasn't enough information to basically identify the end of where that quantity is for the ramp versus where that quantity begins for the main lanes. You would see there in the red text is something that you typically would add and is easy to add. So those are the things that we're discussing with RMA. Simple fixes like this that will definitely help out the plans when it comes to the letting process. And we think that's the next step, is going to be talking to the engineers of record to see to identify that path forward to make those updates. And that's the conclusion of the presentation, and I'll entertain any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Is this something that is built into the whole, that is built into the whole process? All the RMAs do this on some frequent basis, or is this a one-time audit? So this is just for background for myself.
Sure. The typically when I'm going to give you an example. If there's a GEC that's been as part of this process since the beginning of project development, then some of these things would have been inherently done over a period of time leading up to the letting period. But in this scenario where we are right now is we're coming in here towards the end of that process. And so it's always a good idea to run that exercise and run a review of those items, the quantities, the OPCCs, just to make sure that everything is lining up and to the expectations of what the RMA and the board are expecting as far as a budget for the construction project.
Director, to give you some historical perspective, The last go around, our GEC went through this exercise, but they missed the mark. They were off by about $30 million. HDR actually came in as a third-party review and went through this exercise and indicated that our GEC had missed the mark on the estimate at the time. So this is an exercise that we did the last go around. So, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Chairman Directors, the next item on the agenda is a consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the governing body and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. However, if discussion is desired, that item or items will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately.
Can I get a motion for approval of the consent agenda? Motion by Paul, could I get a second? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Chairman, Directors, that's all the business we have for your consideration. I just wanted to make one more comment based on Sam's presentation, is that our current estimate for the project is at 255 million, approximately 255 million. So we're on the lower end of the spread that the GEC has given us there at 258 to 269, but 255, 255, yeah.
So the 202 was that?
That was an actual bid. That was the bid that we received from Johnson Brothers. Right, the lowest bid.
We were estimating that.
170, 170, yes, yes.
So 202 is actual, so at 258, that's 27% plus.
Correct,
And they're 269, 33%.
correct. Yeah, and so,
HDR is saying that 258 to 269 is.
right. And so we think that no, Sam's right here.
So one question I would have, how soon would you need to rebid these numbers or go back in? Your sample is 80%-ish. How often would you go back in? Prices change, right?
Yes.
Once a quarter is probably fair.
That's fair, especially in the light of the market that is.
Is that conservative? Is that aggressive? Once a month?
Well, I think it's not aggressive based on what the market's doing right now, what we're kind of seeing, what's going on. If it was any other time, I think it would have been more likely once every 6 months, maybe even depending on how flat things are.
What do you see people bid? What's a bid good for 30 days?
That's a tough question to answer, because I think what we're hearing from contractors these days is that 30 days is probably minimum, but even then, the suppliers that have quoted them a bid are coming back and saying, hey, sorry, due to certain circumstances with the market or delay in the materials coming in, we're going to have to increase the price by anywhere from 8 to 15%.
So my question is, how often should we do this exercise? Because not doing it again for another 6 months isn't probably a very sensible way of going about it.
I think we probably need to do this in 90 days.
Not every month.
No. I think that would be somewhat aggressive on the aggressive
How long
side.
it takes or what it costs, but yeah, that's something to keep in mind. If we're talking June before, that's best case, right?
Right.
You've got some window of opportunity, which price is a consideration, right? As our 50 basis points, that's all we've got time-wise.
Mhm.
We got our hands full.
Yeah. Since we've already refreshed those connections with the
You feel good about it.
material suppliers, it would be a very, I guess, fairly smooth transition to go back and reconnect with them and say, hey, we want to get an update. So it wouldn't take as long the second time around.
We received monthly evaluation surveys
monitor on all of the state bids and the HCRMA contracts. So we're keeping an eye on that. We are definitely aware and alert. Yes, sir. This is get on alarm. We'll basically call them up. Get the bat phone.
Yes, sir. So the other thing I wanted to add, Chairman, Directors, is that we have some big contractors working in the area. You've got Dragos Polis working on the interchange. That's a $302 million project. You've got, is it Anderson, Colombia, Ramon, that's working on the La Jolla relief route. So we've got some pretty big players already mobilized in the area, and we're hopeful that the timing will work out and that will, because they're already working, Dragos will be here for 3 years working on the interchange. Weber.
Archer was,
Yeah.
they bid the last time around, they're still maintaining, and they watch our, matter of fact, they asked that we live broadcast the meetings so they can maintain concurrence with our meeting and updates, but we received requests to live stream due to the fact that these bigger firms, Weber, et cetera, or North Carolina or other parts of the country, currently working on other projects right now. And they asked if we could live stream so that way they could keep current with the meetings, because they have been trailing and keeping updates and monitoring the progress of our letting. And they fully understand where we are with our administrative circumstance.
So because those big players are in the area and they're mobilized already, we're hoping that we'll see at least a savings on the mobilization. If you recall, the last go round, that was a huge chunk of the bid. And so again, because they're mobilized here, there shouldn't be as great a mobilization cost to bring them into there. Materials is a different story, but we think that that's one of the places that we'll see some competitiveness is in the mobilization. And again, that's always around 10%, could be upwards up to 10% of the bid is where a mobilization lands. So that could be potentially $25 million right there difference. So.
Also, one thing to add on the finance side, the finance model, the CapEx, the capital expense portion of that model includes escalation. So what we run right now in the finance model was actually closer to $259 million in the current plan. So to update it to wherever the GEC at this point would project would be a more likely bid scenario. Recall, this is a range that they're giving us. We feel that there's enough room within the capacity that Hilltop's been running so far, assuming things stay steady, and between that and the increases that they're starting to see in the information they're getting from contractors to still have a viable financial plan.
But make no mistake, time is our enemy because of interest rates creeping up on us. And so, we've made that known to TxDOT that getting those agreements executed is paramount to keeping the project viable. And so we're done everything we can, and the ball's in their court. The chairman has spent a lot of effort trying to get that ball out of their court and back into ours so that this board can take the necessary action that's required so we can get the project to let.
Okay. Any questions? If not, entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion second, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks for that.